I've never slept the same since that trip. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with the sound of the engine still roaring in my head, but the truck isn't even mine anymore. Cold sweat runs down my neck like it did that night, that damned night, and everything comes back. The smell of rust, the empty road, the silence that seemed to breathe behind me. For a long time I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. Tiredness, stress, too much imagination for someone who spends so much time alone on the asphalt. But it wasn't. What I saw, what I heard, wasn't a fabrication. And the worst part is that there are days when I find myself doubting whether I really am the man who got off that truck. Because somehow, a part of me remained inside, locked away along with that cargo. I was told it couldn't be opened. I signed a contract, received a cash advance, and asked no questions. Just the destination and the date. The kind of job you take when you need it and pretend. There's nothing wrong with it. But I felt it. From the moment I touched that sealed door, something inside me began to stir, as if my body knew, before my mind did, that this wasn't just another shipment. And it's like this. Every time I close my eyes, a shiver runs down my spine. The image of that deserted road returns to my mind, and before I know it, I'm back there. It all starts with that first stop, the one I almost didn't make. I used to say the road was the only thing that understood me. It said nothing, but it didn't demand any answers either. It just followed me, straight or crooked, riddled with potholes or covered in fog, and that was enough. It was a relief not to have to explain anything to anyone, not to make excuses, not to smile when inside you just want to disappear. And I wanted to. I wanted to disappear for a long time. After Lucas died, I too ceased to exist. I simply kept walking. They told me to be strong, to keep going, that these things happen, as if the death of a child were a detail of life, a detour along the path and not the end of it. There is no name for a parent who loses a child. There are orphans, there are widowers, but for that, they didn't invent a word. Perhaps because no one wants to name so much pain, because to name it is to admit that it exists. I was 8 years old, and he was just as stubborn as I was. I said he took after his mother, but deep down, I knew he was just like me. I wanted to drive, loved sitting in the passenger seat and being asked questions about every part of the truck. Dad, what if the brake fails? What if the wheel comes off? What if the GPS is lost? I laughed and said it wasn't possible for all of this to happen at once. In the end, it wasn't any of that. It happened fast. A drunk driver, high speed, and a car going the wrong way. I was taking him to school. He flew off like he was just a toy. I only had time to see his eyes, half lost, half scared, and then nothing. Just sirens, and the smell of blood mixed with the ambulance's disinfectant. After that, I couldn't sleep in his room anymore. Not even at my house. I got rid of everything. I sold what I could, packed some photos in a wooden box, and went to live on the road. They told me I was running away. I might even be. But at least on the way, no one looked at me with pity. No one said, "She's in a better place." A better place would be here with me. In the passenger seat. I wonder why the speedometer sometimes shakes. I became an independent truck driver. I did this because I needed to escape from the companies, the schedules, the people. I'd rather sleep in the truck than in a hotel full of voices. Every stop was an opportunity to forget. Every mile, a weight that lifted a little, but only a little, because the pain doesn't go away. It just settles in a corner of your chest, like a wounded animal that sometimes wakes up and bites you. For a while I tried to pretend everything was fine. I even risked talking to other truckers at the stations, chatting for a while the coffee warmed in the fridge. But I realized they noticed. The way I avoided talking about family, the way my voice choked up when people asked if I had children. One even commented once, "You look like you're carrying more than just a load." I smiled, embarrassed, and changed positions on the next trip. Loneliness has become routine. Somehow, I began to sympathize with it. There were days when I didn't even speak. I just turned on the radio, let the road rock me, and let the thoughts come. Sometimes I remembered Lucas's laugh. Sometimes I remembered my ex-wife's face, looking at me as if she no longer knew who I was. And maybe she was right. I didn't know either. At night, when the truck stopped and everything was quiet, it was worse. Because in silence, the boss spoke loudly. I remembered the little things, the smell of baby shampoo, the blue lunchbox, the drawings he made in the back seat with his cookie-stained finger. Little souvenirs, but they get crushed when they arrive unannounced. There were times when I curled up in the seat, covered myself with the blanket, and simply listened to the engine as it cooled down, pretending it was just another night. There was a time when I dreamed about him. At first they were good dreams. We played, we ran, he laughed. But then the nightmares started. He was staring at me, standing in the middle of the road, wearing that torn school uniform, his face half blurred by the headlights. He didn't say anything, he just stared at me, and I would wake up panting, sweating, with the steering wheel glued to the palm of my hand. That's why I accepted that load. Cash up front, no questions asked. No one following me, no one watching me. It was the kind of service you don't offer out loud. It came from a note left in one of the truck's compartments, along with a phone number. When I called, the voice on the other end was crisp, firm, and gave me a meeting point and a date. He said payment would be in hand. Just take it and don't open it. Simple as that. I should have refused. But the truth is, I didn't refuse anything anymore. When you lose what matters most, the rest turns to dust. That day I woke up earlier than usual. The sky was still dark, and the fog licked the asphalt like a blind animal. I made strong coffee, checked the tires, and checked the brakes. Old habits of a driver who's seen it all, except what I was about to see. When I arrived at the warehouse where the load would be placed, I found the place strange. It was too isolated at the end of a dirt road. It smelled of mold and old oil. No noise, not a dog, just my footsteps and the muffled sound of my breathing inside my hood. The warehouse door opened slowly. A woman stepped out, her face covered with a scarf, her coat dark. She handed me an envelope with the agreed-upon amount and pointed to the back of the truck. It's already sealed. Don't touch it, just drive it to its destination. When I tried to ask her what it was, she stared at me for a second and then turned away. The door closed with a dry creak. I stood there holding the envelope, feeling the weight of something that had yet to take shape, but was already announced in the air. I got into the cabin, I started the engine, and for a moment, before I started it, I thought I heard something back there. A creak, a click, or maybe it was just my tired mind. But my stomach sank, the way it does when you know something's wrong even if you don't know what. And then I went. I put it in first gear, started slowly, and let that warehouse disappear in the rearview mirror. The sky began to clear, but the darkness seemed to have entered with me. It wasn't the first time I'd loaded something strange, but I'd never felt that. It was as if the cargo was breathing, as if the road for the first time was afraid of me. But the strangest part was yet to come, and everything, absolutely everything, would begin with that stop I almost didn't make. Have you ever had the feeling that something was wrong, even before it happened? As if everyone around you knew a secret except you? What I experienced on that road is hard to explain, and what was inside that burden haunts me to this day. Before continuing with this story, which is keeping me up at night to this day, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, because what comes next, you may never forget. The note appeared inside the truck's cab on a morning that shouldn't even have begun. It was folded into quarters, on thick paper, with no name, no logo, just a phone number and a sentence written in firm handwriting, as if it had been forcibly engraved. One-time delivery, cash payment, do not open, do not stop. I stared at it for a while, feeling the engine still vibrating under the seat, trying to figure out if it was a joke or some kind of mistake. But something about that sheet, it had weight. You know when something so simple seems heavier than it should? It was like holding on to a bad memory before you remember what it was. I called. The voice on the other end was dry, accentless, and emotionless. He gave me an address in an industrial neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. He told me the exact date and time. He repeated 3 times that the shipment would be ready. No questions asked, no delays. Just drive, drop it off, and leave. And before I could say anything, he hung up. That same day, I checked the truck as I always do, or at least pretended I did. In fact, I was trying to contain the tightness in my chest. Something told me this shipment was different, and not in a good way. But after so much time alone, so much silence filled with memories, working without questions seemed exactly what I needed. I just didn't expect it to be so wrong. I arrived at the warehouse at 2:30 a.m., as agreed. The place was old, with a crooked tin roof, tucked away at the end of a poorly lit dirt road. There were no signs or markers, just a rusty iron fence and a small red lamp that flickered like a tired eye. When I pulled up, the gates opened without me having to honk. Two men emerged from the shadows, their faces covered with black bandanas, their hands gloved, and motioned me back toward one of the docks. No words, no glances. It was as if they already knew exactly who I was. The load was placed without me seeing the contents. They used a forklift covered with a dark tarp. When they finished, one of them approached me and handed me a thick, heavy brown envelope. Cash. No receipt, no signature. Just a warning, whispered so quietly it seemed to come from inside my head. Don't stop. Don't open it, even if you hear something. That's when I saw the seals. The chest was locked with 3 thick chains, woven together like a net. Each chain ran through an industrial lock, sealed with a type of seal I'd never seen before. It wasn't plastic or lead. It looked like some kind of matte resin covered in hand-scratched symbols. Symbols that looked like letters, but didn't belong to any alphabet I knew. One of them seemed to move when I stared at it for more than 3 seconds. I swallowed hard. I wanted to ask what it was, but my mouth wouldn't obey. I simply nodded, as if I'd already understood there was no answer. I started the truck. The engine's roar echoed loudly in the empty warehouse, and for a moment, I swear I felt it, as if something inside my body was vibrating at the same time. A hollow sound, low, like the snore of an animal that's been locked up for a long time. I stepped out, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror, watching the two disappear into the shadows. And as I started the car and left that place behind, the only thing that ran through my head was a phrase repeated, whispered deep within my soul. You've carried a lot in this life, but this will take you. And it was with this, feeling pressed against my skin, that I entered that dark road with the quietest and liveliest load I've ever packed into my truck. Would you keep driving, knowing there's something behind you that maybe shouldn't be there? I often say that the road has its own sound. Each stretch sings differently. The smooth asphalt emits a slight hum, almost a hiss. The parallel road vibrates like an old-fashioned drum. We learn to recognize everything. The weight of the wind against the body, the sound of the tires cutting through puddles, the engine breathing harder on the climbs. But on that trip, everything was strange. Nothing had a rhythm. The sound was out of place. It was already dawn when I took the BR-153, heading south. The rain had stopped, but the fog clung to the ground as if trying to prevent the truck from moving forward. I turned on the radio to try to ease the tension. I let it run through the stations, looking for anything that would move time forward, but it only crackled, static, until, amid the interference, a voice appeared. Low. It whispered. It spoke in a language I didn't understand, or maybe no language at all. It wasn't music. It wasn't news. It was a conversation without people. I hung up, on time. But the feeling that there was someone in the back seat stayed with me for miles. The first time I heard a bodywork noise was near an old bridge just after 3 a.m., a dry, metallic click coming from inside the cargo, as if something had moved quickly and hit the side. I thought it was the structure vibrating on the rough asphalt, but then came another sound, higher pitched, like nails scratching wood, fast, nervous, 3 times. It seemed impatient. I pulled over to the side of the road. I turned on the outside lights. I jumped out with the flashlight. Everything seemed normal. The chains were still there, the seals too, but there was something different in the air. A smell. It wasn't gasoline or oil or burnt brakes. It was something, too, sweet, almost rotten, like ripe fruit. And there was a faint sound like a muffled held breath. I quickly returned to the cabin. I started the engine, and I drove off with the hairs on my arms standing on end. Hours later, with the tank almost empty, I stopped at a small gas station in one of those towns that seem forgotten by everyone. I parked near the pump. The gas station attendant, a thin man with his uniform torn at the shoulders, slowly walked out from behind the counter. As he approached the truck, he suddenly stopped. He frowned. He looked at the load and took 2 steps back. "You better go, friend," he said in a hoarse voice. "I just need to complete," I started to say. "It's not the fuel. It's that thing back there." He gestured with his chin, not getting any closer. "This shouldn't be here." I tried to laugh, to make it seem like it was a heavy burden, but he didn't laugh back. He just crossed his arms. "There was once, years ago, Something similar. Stopped here. It was in the newspaper for a few days. After that, no one spoke about it anymore. Not even the names. Not the bodies. The way he said bodies gave me butterflies in my stomach that didn't go away even after I turned on the heat. I didn't fill up the tank. I left with just over half an hour left, trying to convince myself it was just superstition. But deep down, I already knew it wasn't. That same night, I parked in a rest area between two mountains, surrounded by trees that never stopped swaying even without wind. I lay down on the bench trying to rest my eyes. The clock read 4:16, the last number I saw before erasing it. I don't know how much time passed, but I woke up with a loud bang. It sounded like someone had hit my backside hard with an iron bar. I jumped up, still a little dizzy, my heart pounding against my ribs. I grabbed the flashlight. I left. When I turned the flashlight on the chest, I saw it. Something was wrong. Very badly. The chains were still there, attached. But where the seals had been placed, there were scratches. Several, as if fine fingers or claws had scraped us from the inside out. It wasn't just one or two, it was dozens. They drew a pattern, like a repeating circle, scratched, deep, like something wanting to get out. I touched the nearest seal. It wasn't broken, but it trembled slightly beneath my fingers. It vibrated, as if it were breathing. I walked back to the cabin, trembling. I stopped in front of the door. I got stuck twice, and I looked ahead. Silence, hands on the wheel, but without the strength to turn. Standing there in the middle of the night, surrounded by trees and silence, for the first time since my son died, I felt truly afraid. And that's when the radio turned on by itself. There was no station, no button was pressed, and that same voice whispered again. But this time, it said, my name. I held on as best I could. I swear on everything I have left that I tried to obey, that I took every warning, every sign seriously. The sound of the radio calling my name, the marks on the body, the sweet smell that seemed to grow with every deep breath I took. But there comes a time when silence outweighs fear. That curiosity screams louder than instinct. And that night, alone on top of that mountain with the truck shaking like it had a life of its own, I gave up. It wasn't all at once. I spent hours walking in circles around the chest, the dim flashlight in my hand, my stomach in knots. I was thinking about Lucas. I thought he hated it when I broke promises, and that night I had made a promise to deliver the cargo, unopened, unstoppable. But what if what was in there was bigger than me? What if, for some reason I still didn't understand, it had something to do with me? The shut-off key was on the dashboard. I picked it up with trembling hands. The chains creaked with every movement, as if screaming at me to stop. It took me a while to open each one. They weren't locked, just keyholes that looked more ornamental than functional. The seals, those really gave me trouble. Not because they were firm, but because touching them was like putting my hand on something that shouldn't be there. The surface was scorching cold. It made no sense. It was like live ice. When I pulled out the last one, it didn't break. It dissolved. It disappeared, as if it had never been there. The trunk lid opened slowly, not because of my strength, but as if I'd been pushed from the inside. A creaking sound echoed through the woods, startling something moving in the trees. And then I saw it. The capsule. It was cylindrical, metallic, covered in symbols, etched directly into the structure. They didn't look handmade. They were too perfect, too precise. Some glowed as if alive. They didn't flicker. They pulsed. The metal wasn't silver or lead. It was something dark, opaque, with a slight bluish tinge that moved when the flashlight flickered. There were no screws or hinges, just a small door in the center and a mirror attached to it. At least that's what it looked like. But he was black, totally black, no reflection, no shine, like a stain on reality itself. I approached slowly, my heart pounding in my ribs. It was cold, but my forehead was drenched with sweat as if I had a high fever. With each step, the air seemed thicker. Every breath was an effort. My body said no, but my eyes couldn't look away. When I was less than a meter away, it happened. The mirror has changed. From solid black it began to turn liquid, but without running, like living paint, and in the midst of that dark swirl, a face appeared. Me. But it wasn't me. The eyes were wide open, the pupils dilated, as if someone had seen something they shouldn't have. The skin was pale, almost greenish, and its mouth, it opened in a silent scream, as if it were trapped somewhere where sound didn't exist. It stared at me desperately, and then it slammed the glass hard. Allende! A dull thud, so hard it shook my chest. I jumped back. The flashlight fell from my hand, illuminating the ground beneath the capsule. I saw my own feet, and his. 2 pairs. The same. One here, one inside. I closed my eyes for a moment, just for one. I prayed for a delirium, for a bad dream, but when I opened them again, the mirror was opaque, dead, as if nothing had happened. The capsule was still there, intact, silent, but I knew it. He saw me, and I saw him. The question that has been haunting me ever since is the simplest and at the same time the most unbearable. Who among us is in the wrong place? Do you think you would have closed the door and moved on, after seeing your own soul crying out for help on the other side? At first I tried to pretend it hadn't happened. I closed the trunk, locked the chains as best I could, even though I knew they'd be useless now, and locked myself in the cab. I started the engine. I turned on the radio. Suddenly, as if the noise could drown out what I'd seen, but it was no use. The face was still there, in my eyes, in the back of my throat, and the worst part wasn't the shock. It was the strange, repulsive feeling of deep appreciation. It wasn't just someone who looked like me. It was me. It wasn't just physical. It was the look. It was fear. It was exhaustion, the guilt. I knew that kind of despair. I'd endured it before. I drove without thinking. For miles. I only realized I was still on the road when I saw a sign for a motel on the side of the road. One of those old ones on the side of the road with few lit windows and the smell of cigarettes in the lobby. I don't usually stop at these places, but that night I had no choice. My hands were shaking badly. My breath was shallow. I needed to get away from the pod, from myself. In the bedroom, lying on the thin bed with stained sheets, the ceiling seemed to spin. I tried to sleep, but sleep came in fragments. Dreams of metal, mirrors, and echoes of my own. Voice screaming inside my head. Around 3 in the morning, my cell phone rang. No name, no number, just a dry vibration that made my body go cold. Wait, nothing. For a few seconds, only a faint static sound was heard, until a voice whispered, "Now you see. Don't try to run away." The call was cut off. I jumped. The light in the room flickered as if it were going out. I felt a presence outside, a shadow passing by the window. I grabbed my jacket, the truck key, and got out, almost tripping over. My own feet. The road was empty. The night, thick. But the truck seemed to be waiting for me, with its headlights off and the engine warm. Inside the cabin, I found an envelope. It hadn't been there before. It was dark leather, with the flap folded down. No name, no address, but heavy. Inside were documents, diagrams, schematics that looked like science fiction, but they were there, printed, on thick, yellowed paper. Most of it is illegible. Codes, notes, symbols. But in the center of one of the pages, the design of the capsule, and below in handwritten letters, Type D4 device, experimental time anchor, area, controlled entropy. I read it about 5 times without understanding anything, but below another excerpt written in red pen. The contents are unstable. Beware of reflection. An entity from a parallel reality could react. Tests indicate that fully opening the box triggers the collision point. Collision point. That's what I had felt. The collision of me. With him. Or with other I. One who didn't make it. One who tried and paid the price. There was one more thing in the envelope. A torn, handwritten note. If you're reading this, then the previous version failed. Don't reopen it. Deliver it. And forget about it. Before the loop closes. I tried to convince myself it was a joke. A well-staged show. But the truth had already pierced me like a cold sword. He was not the first. The load had been carried before. Perhaps dozens of times. By others like me. Or by versions of myself. And somewhere in this unhealthy cycle the thread broke. One of us saw what we weren't meant to see. Got stuck. And now, perhaps I would be next. I looked back at the rearview mirror. For a second, just for a second, the glass reflected 2 faces. One in the cockpit, one in the back seat. Both are the same, both looking forward. What follows me now? Am I still me? Do you think there's only one version of us living all this here? Or is there another waiting for the right moment to take its place? The next day I woke up with a rusty taste in my mouth and a high-pitched ringing in my left ear, as if someone had been screaming inside it all night. I lay in the truck seat, covered in sweat, my fingers still clutching the note from the night before. I didn't even remember returning to the cabin, much less falling asleep. But there I was, and the sound coming from behind. It was no longer a noise. It was a call. The capsule vibrated. It wasn't a subtle tremor. The entire truck seemed to resonate with a frequency that was not of this world. The steering wheel trembled beneath my fingers. The radio hissed and died, and the morning light didn't seem to penetrate the metal structure as it should. The trunk was dark, as if it carried the night itself inside. I put the car in gear and started driving, not because I wanted to, but because everything in my body was screaming that stopping was no longer an option. The cargo needed to be transported. It was the only certainty left, as if simply moving toward the destination contained something, a lid, a limit. I didn't know exactly where to go, but my body seemed to know. I took a side road I'd normally never choose, narrow, flanked by dense trees, no license plate, no car, just the sound of the capsule growing. The light came first. Through the cracks in the cabin, a dense bluish pulse, like a silent lightning bolt. Each flash made my stomach churn. My eyes burned. And then came the smell. That sweet, rotten smell again, but stronger now. More aggressive, like burnt flesh mixed with dead flowers. I stopped the truck. I couldn't stand it. I fell, stumbling and tripping over the bushes. I vomited behind the wheel, the bitter taste rising in my throat. But even outside, the sound continued. The vibration, the light, as if the truck were breathing, as if it were a body. And the capsule, your heart. I ran. I started walking away, about 30 meters, maybe more. And that's when I realized the ground was vibrating beneath my feet. The surrounding countryside trembled as if reality were there. Extension. I stopped. I looked back, and the truck was sinking. Not on the ground, that's on, as if something around them was being pulled, sucked, distorted. The trees on either side of the road seemed to lean toward the chest. The leaves trembled without wind, and time slowed. Or was it me who stopped? The thought came like a punch. If I don't continue, this will come to light. Maybe it had already appeared before in other versions. Maybe that's why the note existed. Maybe that's what the mirror showed. The price open and don't fill, because what's inside does not want to be handed over. He wants to stay. I want to leave. He wants to find loopholes. I ran back. I entered the cabin without thinking. I started the engine. The key was as cold as wet ice. I put the car in gear, and the truck responded. The vibration subsided. It was still there, but more subdued, like a tamed beast for a few miles. As I drove, I noticed reflections in the windows, reflections that didn't match the landscape. Sometimes I saw signs where there was nothing, old traffic signs. The reflection of a boy in the passenger seat. Who knew exactly who he was? The path guided me and I could only follow it. But then the capsule started to make sound. No words, no voices, memories. I heard Lucas laugh, loud, alive, like he was before. I saw glimpses of a birthday, chocolate cake, a toy truck, and my own voice, saying I'd never leave him alone. The capsule was showing me all of this, pulling me along, testing me. It was then that I understood it doesn't just carry mass. It carries memory, fragments, echoes, overlapping lives. And now, I was trying to open it again. My hands were sweating so much they were slipping on the steering wheel. My eyes were burning. But I kept going, mile after mile, feeling like with every meter I traveled, something was clinging to me, like a lid being forced shut again. But I knew the road was ending. And when it was all over, what would happen to me? Would you go all the way, even without knowing what awaits you on the other side? The sky was just beginning to clear when the road changed again. The asphalt turned into dirt, then gravel, then nothing. It was as if I was passing through a place that no longer existed on maps. The vegetation seemed drier, the air thicker. Even the sound of the tires was gone. The truck now glided silently over terrain I couldn't describe. It wasn't clay or stone, it was too smooth, as if someone had erased the world around them and left only the road. The GPS stopped working the previous kilometer. The screen was stuck in an eternal recalculation, as if even he were lost or scared. And then I saw it, an old twisted concrete structure in the middle of nowhere. It looked like an abandoned warehouse, but something was off about the shape, the curved walls, the asymmetrical entrance, and no signs of life around. I stopped the truck about 30 meters away. The air was thick and grey. There were no sounds of birds, wind, or engines. Nothing. Only the muffled sound of the capsule, which now seemed to be breathing slowly, as if content. I stood there for a few seconds, not knowing what to do. That's when the numbers appeared. They emerged from the shadows as if they'd always been there. 3 people, dressed in long, hooded, dark clothes too, heavy for the stifling heat. They didn't speak. They didn't hurry. They simply came toward me with soft, almost soundless steps. The one in the middle approached the truck door. I didn't ask permission. He simply looked at me, and he said, "You were the only one who managed to get here." The voice was neutral, toneless, without emotion, like a file being read aloud. I wanted to ask what that meant, what had happened to the others, but something inside me, an ancient, instinctive fear, kept me from opening my mouth. It was as if asking was summoning something that was still waiting for the chance to come out. I got out of the truck. I handed over the key. The hooded man took the wad of bills I already had in his hands and handed it to me. No explanation, no receipt. The touch was cold, but not icy, dead, as if he were taking something that shouldn't belong to anyone. "Now go," he said, "and don't come back there." I slowly returned along the same path, but something was already different. The gravel road closed behind me, as if the path was erased with every step. When I looked back, the warehouse was no longer there. Not the truck, the figures either. Just an empty, deserted field, where the horizon seemed too soft. I picked up the spare car I'd left at a gas station 40 kilometers away. I still had fuel left, and my body was shaking less. But the silence was different. In the first city I entered, I tried to talk to someone about what I had seen. But the words didn't come out well. They seemed silly, childish, improbable. No one would believe it. I wouldn't believe it either. I saved the money. I kept driving. But something inside me wasn't calm anymore. The capsule has been delivered. Mission accomplished. But what about what it was carrying? Did you stay there, or did you come with me? Because since that night something follows me, and the rearview mirror still reflects too. The world returned to normal too quickly. After everything I'd seen, everything I'd felt, everything I'd carried, it was as if life had decided to pretend nothing had happened. The radio worked again. So did the GPS. The road was filled with trucks, honking horns, diesel fumes, everything where it should have been. But something was off in the air even when everything seemed right. I tried to convince myself that the silence was just silence now, that the weight on his back was just tiredness, that the flashes of memory were nothing more than remnants of the trauma. But it's hard to lie to yourself when the lie is whispering your name. I drove for hours with no destination in sight. I just wanted to escape, get out of that spot, from that road, from that country if possible. I hid in a gas station at the state line, a place that used to be my refuge, where the faces are always new, the conversations are brief, and no one asks questions. I stuffed myself. I ate something. I tried to laugh at a joke the gas station attendant made, but my voice came out weak as if passing through water. I went to the bathroom, alone, washing my face, trying to erase from my skin what the capsule mirror had seared into my bones. It was automatic. I looked at myself in the mirror, but I didn't see anything. It wasn't darkness, not even a power failure, not even steam. The mirror was clean. The room was clear, but the glass didn't reflect my face. Nothing. The bottom of the sink, the opposite wall, the fluorescent light, everything. Visible. Everything is there, except me. I reached out. I touched the glass. Cold, real, but empty, as if the mirror refused to recognize me. I swallowed hard. I turned my face away. I walked back slowly. Still nothing. I turned and looked around, hoping to find something, some simple explanation. A crack in the mirror, a protective film, but it was just glass, straight, frozen, and silent. I leaned my forehead against the surface. I closed my eyes. and for a second, it felt like another. Forehead was touching the other side. A sigh. Slow, as if something or someone were still move. Wait. I staggered out of there without looking back. The sun was already rising, but the light no longer seemed to warm me. The road was there, as it had always been. Open, long, full of curves I knew by heart, but the passenger seat seemed occupied, not by a body, but by a presence, a silent shadow, made of the same doubt that had accompanied me from the moment I opened that cargo. With who came back if it wasn't exactly me? Since that day, every time I look in the mirror, at home, in store windows, in the reflection of the rearview mirror, the question returns, not with words, without fear, for sure. Was it me who came back? Have you ever felt like something inside you changed, and no one else noticed? If this story gave you goosebumps, held your breath, or even reminded you of something you've never told anyone before, then it did what it was meant to do. Stories like this aren't just mysteries, they're mirrors of what we hide inside ourselves. And now that you've experienced it with me, you can help others feel the same. Like, subscribe to the channel, and comment with a word that only those who made it to the end will understand. Reflection. This shows me that you're with us on this journey, and it also paves the way for what comes next, because the next video is even darker, and perhaps more real than you imagine. It's already appearing on the screen. If I were you, I'd click. If this story has stayed with you this far, it's because in some way it has spoken to you, perhaps through the tension, the questions left unanswered, or that feeling that there's something there that you've also felt, but have never been able to explain. And that's why this channel exists, to give voice to these stories that seem too unreal to be invented and too real to be ignored. When you like the video and subscribe, you're helping more people have the same experience. You're helping them feel like they're not alone in the strange things they're going through. That's how you're part of it all, strengthening a space where these stories live on, even after the final second. And speaking of continuing, the following video is already on screen, and honestly, it'll hit you in a different way because today's story was about a warning that came too late. The next one is about someone who he knew it from the beginning and lied to everyone. You'll understand why there are secrets that are buried, not to protect others but to prevent they go back. Leave your word here in the comments. Reflection. So he knows that you felt this story until the end. And if you felt it, take a deep breath, because what comes next will make you doubt what you see. What